So yeah, I am Megan Livadas. If you've not heard from me before, I was here almost 2 years ago now, actually, which is crazy. I was here in June 2023 talking about Power BI governance. And that felt like a very new topic at the time. It felt like we were really kind of onto something that was just about to be a big thing. Um, Kind of 18 months on, I can say we've deployed that framework that I presented so many times now to our clients. And every time we do it, we're learning so much. What this session is going to be about is honing right in on the people side. And so we've had a really technical session from David. We're going to walk it right back now, and we're going to talk about some of the fluffier, holistic people side of things. So hopefully that's going to be quite fun. If you don't know me, I am the head of BI for the Microsoft practice at Dufresne. You've heard lots about Dufresne and what we do from David, but yeah, we're a data consultancy. I've worked there since 2020, so yeah, nearly kind of 5 years into working for Dufresne. So yeah, I'm also recently blogging at livadata.wordpress.com. That's a new thing for me. Here I am down here, if you weren't sure. And so yeah, I work across a range of industries, but you'll often find me in insurance, in retail. Those are kind of some of my favourites. But what you'll mostly find me talking about is Power BI culture. So not just let's build some reports, but how do we actually get people using them? How do we then clean up the platform and stop it becoming a beast that's just not worth managing? So before I kind of get into, I guess, the people side of things, let's talk a little bit about Power BI governance. Why do we bother? How did we get here? How did this become a thing in its own right? So you'll very rarely hear about a Power BI implementation plan. You know, someone switches on a tenant, someone buys some licenses, they assign them, and people get building. That's our job done, right? Happy days. Where I typically come in is about 1 year later, usually somewhere down the line. There is now thousands of workspaces. They've just been getting created for free fall. You've seen that tenant setting that David Mills shared, create new workspaces. That's on by default. So anyone's can add them, and they've been adding them. There is no version of the truth. So people are turning up to meetings. They've got different versions of the same number. Nobody knows how they got there. Swimming in duplicates of the same content. I once seen a workspace last year, production workspace, that had 25 versions of the same model. Nobody could tell me which one was the latest one. I sent them an Excel spreadsheet and said, tell me which one's the latest. And they tagged 5 of them and said, all 5 of these are the right one. It was great. Users have gave up. They've gone back to Excel. They're like, you know what? I don't know where to find anything. I'm just going to go and get my spreadsheet out and we'll call it a day. And we can't blame them. Now, at some point, someone gets a bug, you get sent to go and fix it, and you open up your long departed colleagues' Power BI they built in 2021, and you found 45 Power Query steps to unpick. I'm sure that's fun. At some point, someone's capacity is probably going to be throttled because with that many versions of the same content running in workspaces nobody is managing, you're not really asking for much, are you? And so at some point, it becomes quite easy to just think, well, we just give it up. Let's blame the tech. It's Power BI's fault. It's not our fault. Let's maybe go get a new tool somewhere. What I'm here to say is actually this is a fantastic position to be in because this means that people actually want to use the tool. This mess means that people are excited and there is a need. And it is so much better to work your way from this to where you want to be than to have a perfect platform that nobody is using. That is a waste of all of our time. So this is exciting. And this is an opportunity for us to grab a platform and turn it into something we want. But before we talk processes and we talk technology, I think all of that has to be shaped around the people. I'm never going to tell you that there is a way to do something. If a setting exists, if a methodology exists in Fabric, in Power BI, it's there because Microsoft feel that someone somewhere might want that. And so I'm never going to tell you that that is how you do it. A client once said to me, like, Microsoft, there'll be 1,000 ways to do something. They won't tell you the one right way to do it. There isn't. And so tonight's session is about how do we look at the people in your organisation and shape the processes and the technology around them. And so what you're probably thinking is, well, I got really good at the Power BI stuff, but now I need to learn Fabric as well. Like, how can I keep up? And so we're going to put a heavy Fabric theme on tonight. So not just how do you build your BI team and how do you upskill as a BI person, but how do you do that in a Fabric world? Conversations that I think we'd kind of locked down and became quite easy maybe 18 months ago are all of a sudden very different. So if I say to you, who's your Power BI admin? A lot of people will be able to answer that question. If I say, who's your Fabric admin? That's a bit more political. That's something that we're having to work out with a lot of organisations right now. And so that is what tonight is going to be about. So I want to get a bit of a show of hands. I want to understand what kind of people I have in the room with me. I'm going to pull up a couple of boxes. Now, this is not exhaustive. I've definitely skipped some. And as David was talking, I realised I actually skipped the architects. So sorry about that. I guess in a BI world, these are the ones that you're going to most likely kind of run into, right? So hands up people who would say that they are most of a BI person. You sit in a BI team. Okay, that's about half the room. Lovely. Who would then say that they're on the other side of the fence and they're more of an engineer? Okay, nice. What I also want to know is there anybody here who runs a BI team, is a BI admin and is responsible for all of that? Got a couple. Okay, lovely. Nice. So that's a great sample. And I think what you'll see is sometimes with are you BI, you're engineering, maybe the same hand going up twice, because definitely some people wear both those hats. And that's the theme of this. So if you're a very small organization, you're looking at this and thinking, I'm all of them. You know, there is absolutely one-man teams that I've seen that wear all those hats. Very recently had a client, their data team was the size of three, and that was a multi-million-dollar retailer. There was three in the data team, and you know that's all they needed for what they were doing. And so the key to this is it's not overkill. It's about understanding that these are all hats that someone has to wear. Doesn't mean that there's a different person for every hat, but it means that you need to understand this role exists for a reason. Who is that in my business? Okay. So if you're a small organization, and let's look at that data team of three. So you could have a BI manager, a BI developer, and a data engineer, and that's fine. That's totally great. What you need to understand though is that one of you is a fabric admin, one of you is a capacity admin, one of you is going to be a pipeline admin. So if you are using Power BI deployment pipelines, I think it's sometimes just assumed that anyone that's developing might be the pipeline admin. To me, I like to call that out as a separate role because I've seen it work really well where only certain people are pipeline admins. So where you have very large BI teams and anyone is developing and QA is maybe a bit of an issue, it can be a nice rhythm to sort of set it up where most of the developers have access to development, and then actually there's only some pipeline admins that have the ability to push to production. And that I think helped one of the large clients I worked with that transitionary period towards getting everything QA'd. So creating a little bit of a bottleneck, but to get the rest of the team in the habit of passing that QA that they were looking for. For a very large organisation, this will look completely different. So we'll have a much more robust BI team. There might be a head of BI, a lead BI developer, and that lead BI developer is probably going to be your main fabric admin. That's the person updating the tenant settings, looking at your monitoring, checking your version control. Now, we don't want a key man dependency, so the head of BI might have the fabric admin access too. They're maybe just using that to kind of poke around and see what's new. There will be a range of BI engineers and BI developers underneath. Now, I always call those two things out as separate. BI developer, BI engineer. I think if you're maybe applying for a job and you're looking at the market, you'll see those maybe used a bit interchangeably. How I define them at Dufresne is a BI developer for me is someone that specialises slightly more in the front end. So I'd expect you to build a robust semantic model and a really great front end, but you might not be able to necessarily go and build a gold layer. You might not necessarily be able to go and write the SQL queries or write the Fabric notebooks that shape your data. You need someone to do that for you. And then once you've got your facts and dims, you can do the rest in Power BI. A BI engineer is someone that I'd expect to straddle both worlds a little bit. And you'll also see this referred to something as an analytics engineer. So this is someone that would start to move into the Fabric space and be writing their own notebooks. So an engineer might have ingested their data, might have even cleaned it in the silver layer, but then you're able to build the gold layer that you're looking for, because who better to do that than the person that's going to use it? I think as Power BI people, we know it's a little bit fussy. Certain things that would work elsewhere, like maybe role-playing dimensions, it's not really what we want. We want to have the same dimension multiple times so that I've got one clean relationship. Use relationship DAX isn't always what we need for every use case. And so that separation of a BI engineer to a BI developer, I think can be one of the key things that's going to help you shift into a Fabric world. And I'll come back to that. BI business partners, I think this is one of the most key things. A client I was talking to today actually was talking about how the key thing they're missing is the middle layer between a ticket sitting in the backlog and them having to build. That BI business partner can be the bridge between, if you want to get away from being someone that's just fighting a backlog all the time and become an organization that's proactively meeting your customers' needs, your BI business partner is someone who's dedicated to going, who are you? What is your job? How can I help you do your job? Show me your spreadsheets. Show me what you're doing with the spreadsheets. And then actually, great, we've got a model that's going to help you with this. And so, yeah, can't recommend enough defining that role. And if you are that small organization, well, then BI manager, that's probably you. BI developer might even be you too, depending on how close you get to your customers. But understanding that those roles exist and making sure that someone is defined to fulfill that role is how you can make this flexible. Now, in those large organizations, we've then got other people that are going to be operating in the Fabric world that maybe don't sit in the BI team. So data engineers, data scientists, or data governance friends. I think where data governance and the BI team will often link in quite a lot in a Fabric world is looking at things like Purview, scanning Power BI, being able to kind of use that as a catalogue for your customers. Certification processes. I've worked at organizations where data governance teams want to own the certification process for Power BI, but they don't ever touch Power BI. And so they go, we've designed this process, it's great, we're going to use this to tell everyone that the data is a strategic source and it's got all the metadata tracked and the data quality is great. And I go, okay, fine, That one that you've picked has 40 Power Query steps, it has 3 lineage touch points, and it's full of really bad DAX. So you can certify that because you know it's using your platform, but you've not certified what any of the Power BI people have done to it since. So data governance and your BI team have got to work hand in hand on a process like that. Now you might have a BI developer that sits in a completely different region. They might own their own capacity. Understanding the nature of the capacity admin as a dedicated role rather than something that's got to sit with the topmost person in the team is something that can let you be really flexible like that. Let's say that person in APAC has their own budget, they've went and got their own budget for their own capacity. You don't need to manage that as a central team for most organisations. You can let them do what they need to do with their own capacity, and that's one extra thing that is going to be off your plate. What you'll often hear me talking about with Power BI governance is that balance between controls and innovation. There are so many controls that we can put in place, but the more we put in place, we're going to stifle innovation. If we put none in place and we let innovation run riot, we have a mess. And so everything we do here is about finding that balance. We then have got our business, and I'll separate this in this large organisation from data consumers to our power users, and understanding those power users and their appetite for how far in the Fabric world they want to kind of get into. That is going to be key to understanding what access you're going to give them. As we start to see more come to domain level access, I think that's going to be quite exciting. Being able to delegate certain tenant settings to domains so that certain people can run their little part of the tenant the way they want to. There's not many settings that are at domain level yet. I think we'll see a lot more of that as time comes, and you'll start to see very large organisations sharing a tenant and then different business units within that being able to manage their own organisations the way they need to. So from here, one thing that I'll call out, BI developers, data engineers sat in completely different teams. One of the first things that I felt when I saw Fabric for the first time was that needs to change. I've worked in teams where BI people and engineers sit in the same management team, are very close, and everything moves very quickly. And I've also sat in organisations where they do not speak to each other. Maybe once a week, the two managers speak to each other, but the people in the teams probably don't even know each other's names, except for a ticket coming in once every so often. That doesn't work in Fabric. And I'll tell you why I feel that way. So teams where BI is sitting over here and data engineering is sitting over here, and then there's maybe business analysts and delivery people sitting over here. I think what I've often seen is it's defined this way because of a management structure that worked at some point, and a business analyst is going to go speak to the business, the BI people don't get involved, the data engineers don't get involved. They come back with a requirement, the data engineer is going to build that, the BI people gets it, and you're going to have iterations of feedback that work their way through the chain, and on we go forever. I think the key to this succeeding in Fabric is to just pivot how you look at it. Your management structure might not need to change, but the way you work does. Good old Venn diagram. Collaborative working is going to be the key to success in Fabric. So I think working in pods is going to be the way that you'll start to feel the traction that you want. There is no one person that will be a master of Fabric. It's too broad. You've seen the depth that David covered tonight in security. Can you expect BI teams to be able to go and manage that? Maybe not. A lot of it, like the workspace roles and the role-based access, that stuff we've been doing for years, and it's exciting, I think, to hear other parts of our businesses all starting to realise how much goes into that. But all that network engineering, that we're going to need to work as pods to make that work. There's so much that we in the business intelligence sphere have been doing for years that our engineering and our delivery friends are going to need to know from us. And so working as pods on particular use cases. So you might still have these 3 distinct teams, but with each distinct use case, with each distinct delivery, pod those people up together and assign squads, essentially, that are comprised of cross-functional teams, and that is how you'll start to see Fabric coming along. Now, where do we start? So it's time to do Fabric is a bit intimidating. I think the key thing that I want to say with where do we start with Fabric? I'm a BI team, I want to do Fabric. Do we just turn it on and just start writing some notebooks? The advice that I would have is you start with your use case. So what is your first use case? I think as a room full of mostly very technical people, doing Fabric feels exciting enough to justify our existence. We can turn up and we can say, excuse me, we would like a lot of money, we're going to do Fabric. That's really exciting to us, not that exciting to your CFO. It's not that exciting to your head of marketing. We need to think of the business value before we think of any tech. What is this actually going to bring to the business? You've got a SQL server right now, you've got some reporting, maybe it's expensive. We know that it's going to be really exciting to move all that transformation and the tech debt that we've built up in Power BI because we don't have access to SQL or the engineers. That's exciting to move that to Fabric, but is that exciting to anyone else that's getting the reporting they need? No. We need to think first of all about what can Fabric bring that use case. Think about Azure AI Foundry. Think about Copilot. How is that going to make it more exciting for people to justify the reinvestment into this tool? And the more you tie the why of your organization, what are we not doing right now with the tech that we've got that we could do with Fabric, and shape your stuff around that, that is where this is going to start to gain some traction. And don't lose sight of that. I think as your Fabric projects start to progress, you'll start to get lost up in so many ways to architect it, so many different ways to engineer it. At every single point, you have to remember, why are we doing this? What's the end goal? What's the report that comes at the end of this that justifies the existence? So the next time is, time to unpick that Power BI tech debt. I've seen a lot of organizations that have had Power BI for some time getting ready to move into Fabric, and it's time to get the bronze layer set up, time to get a silver layer set up, and then we're just going to move our Power BI models over. Maybe not quite. If you're about to put all of that ETL process that sat over here all these years onto the same capacity as your Power BI stuff, and your Power BI stuff has been slowly picking up tech debt over the years, now it's time to unpick that. So to be honest, it's a great opportunity. So starting right at the end, how I would do this, I had a workshop just last week where we looked at this. Start with a report and say, right, here's the metrics in this report. What story am I actually trying to tell? What data sources does that come from? I'm just going to slowly unpick each transformation step, and then I'm going to understand, right, that's my Fabric gold layer. So within starting out a report, working your way back. When you start with your data sources and start to kind of work your way through, you're just moving further and further away from the business. You always should be starting with what is the person that is going to use this at the end going to actually care about, what filters are going on that number, and what transformation and merges is happening there, and unpick your way back the way, and that's going to shape your engineering around that. And working in that pod, you've then got the best three people to have that conversation. Your business analyst is able to communicate with your stakeholders and understand what they need and document this. Your business intelligence people that are able to work their way through years of Power Query and DAX that nobody else is going to understand. And then your data engineers that are going to be able to quickly translate what does that look like in a Fabric notebook. So next, now it's time to design your Fabric architecture. I think some would maybe argue that this comes much earlier, but I think it's about understanding why are we bothering with this and what does Power BI look like, and now let's shape the Fabric architecture around that. Now, this is where I'm going to say something maybe a bit controversial. I think when you're early with Fabric, especially if you're a BI-based team, you need to shape the technology and the architecture around your skills. So I've spent years asking people to not use data flows so much and just put things in their model. Of course, there's great times to use data flows, but I see a lot of people leaning on data flows to just cover up a lack of engineering and just screeds a Power Query sitting in a data flow somewhere and then more sitting in a model. And so I'm actually going against the advice that I've been giving out maybe for the last couple of years, and that's if you're a BI team getting ready to do Fabric, and you're faced with PySpark and Spark SQL, and that's really intimidating, start with data flows. My first Fabric proof of concept, I used a data flow. Nobody could get a connection string to work in the copy data function, and I went, I'm going to try a data flow because I know how to do that, and it worked. And that, maybe it's not the best practice thing that we want to put into production, but it's what got me connected to my data and playing in Fabric and understanding what a Fabric architecture might start to look like. Because as you work through those requirements, and as I keep saying, get back to the use case, that is where the rest is going to fit in. Understand what the value in any of this is, and then you can shape the tech around that. Copilot aided development, so if you are not as comfortable with notebooks, if Python is not a natural language to you, and you're lucky enough to have a P1, F64, Copilot is right there. Much better using Copilot to help you write your code than maybe say ChatGPT. Use it from Microsoft. I think Chris Webb does a lot of really good talks on Copilot for Power BI and using DAX Query Editor. And so I would very much recommend that. And then lastly, let's bring this to life. So augment your use case with a full Fabric capability. Data Activator is so exciting. I think the things that can be done with Data Activator, you might be producing a report that is giving retention statistics to marketing. What are they going to do with that? They're probably going to trigger a campaign. And so can you not set up Data Activator to, okay, retention has fallen below X amount, it's time to trigger that campaign. The amount that you can do within the Fabric platform with Data Activator, with Azure AI Foundry. A colleague demoed to me quite recently Azure AI Foundry, just reading an invoice, and it's just an inbuilt function. We were on a client call and he literally just pulled it up, clicked in, and loaded in an invoice, and it picked out the specific bits of the invoice that he needed. That's the kind of stuff that used to justify entire projects of our time, and now Azure AI Foundry is able to just grow in, grab what we need. Very exciting. And Purview. I think Purview is going to be the answer to so much of our data quality problems that we've had as Power BI people for a long time. And this investment, it's not that Power BI and Purview haven't always been there, but I think the investment in Fabric is the catalyst that we need to bring all these things together. So as a BI team, I would say this is your roadmap. This is how you want to start to work. As the BI team, are you going to be the ones that are out deploying Azure, Foundry, and Purview? Maybe not, but you can absolutely play with it and understand it, because as the people that are closest a lot of the time to the users and what they need, figuring out that use case to justify the business case and the investment is what's going to get this stuff off the ground. What I would then say is augment that hands-on experience with certifications. So DP600 is a great learning path. I don't speak a bit of Python, but I still passed it. If you know enough about Power BI and you take the time to understand Fabric architecture, yes, there'll be some questions in DP600 about the notebooks. Wing it, you'll be fine. You'll get past. Maybe that's not the right advice. Learn some Python, but for me, I got there. And so yeah, I think that's really the key to getting started with Fabric as a BI team in a Fabric world. One last thing I'll touch on is just skill assessments. So taking stock of where you are now, especially if you're a much bigger team. I'm going to pull up a really horrible slide here. I'm not expecting you to read all that, but this is just an example of maybe a skill assessment that I would do. So categories from Power BI modeling, visualization, and governance, right through to SQL engineering and other engineering. And I split that out because I guess what we need to understand is, are you comfortable going and writing the SQL that's needed to bring this data to life? And then have you got the engineering skills to actually shape the stuff around it, like our APIs and our Power Apps? Excel, there are a lot of organisations where a reporting team and a BI team is still going to be very dependent on Excel. So I think it's important to kind of give that stock when you're doing these skill assessments. And then BA skills are functional skills. And I rate these right from just novice through to expert. There's loads of ways that you can do this. Find the right wording. Sometimes I just make these anonymous as well. You don't always have to do these named. It doesn't have to be a performance management activity. But letting people anonymously self-assess in these skills so that you've got a better picture of what is the health of my team and where do I need to invest my time. So right now we have got a kind of average score here of about 3 in this example for Power BI modeling and visualization, slightly less in the governance, the SQL engineering and the other engineering is where we're going to start to fall over. And so for this BI team, that engineering skill set is where we're going to want to focus our time. And so yeah, that is just a really whistle-stop tour through, I guess, the people side of bringing this to life. What I want to close off with is my key principles of Power BI governance. There is a lot of noise out there, I guess, about the right way to do things. And what I've talked tonight about is just how do you bring that to life and shape it around your people. There are so many blogs out there that will tell you the right way to do things, but all you can do as a team, I think, is define the organizational principles that are going to work for you as a team and stay true to them. This is the 4 that I use in my Dufresne Power BI governance frameworks that we roll out. So make it secure, exactly what David was talking about tonight. Everything that we do should be grounded in, is this going to cause a data breach? Is this going to cause someone to get something they shouldn't? Is it going to ensure that we have one version of the truth? If I decide that actually there needs to be a second data set here because it's too heavy in this one, is that going to cause someone somewhere to have conflicting information? Overhead. Nothing that we do comes without overhead, but keep it as minimal as you can. As Power BI people, I think we've been used to for quite a long time in many organisations just accepting that we're going to have a big overhead of tech debt at all times. I think with Fabric, that really is the catalyst now to not have that. Fabric exists to democratise data. Engineering isn't this secret, accessible thing over here somewhere anymore. It's in our platform that we've been working on for years. And so this is the time to reduce your overhead, move things upstream. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, keep people happy. None of this matters if people are not using the tool. And so while a really busy, messy Power BI platform can feel like a curse, it's because people are using the thing, and that is a blessing. And so I never want to chastise people when I see screens of Power Query and 50 workspaces. Like, it's a good thing. And so these are my 4 principles. I would just say any decision that lands on your desk that feels a little bit like it deviates from the best practice, if it meets these 4 principles, you're not hurting anyone. Do what's right for you as a team. So yeah, that's me. Key principles of Power BI governance and building your BI team in a Fabric world. I'll open for any questions. Go for it. Yeah. Okay, go for it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so something that we'll often do in our sort of deliveries at Dufresne is we'll have 6 weeks to implement a governance, Power BI governance strategy. We'll spend usually about 2 weeks doing where are we now? So that's lots of interviews and the skill assessments and a platform audit. So yes, we'll speak to you and we'll get it from you, but we're also going to go look at the platform and see what the platform is telling us that you're doing. And we augment that with the skill assessments. There is no way that I can come in with a framework and say this is your BI team, because every business is a different size, different budgets. And at the end of the day, all these little purple blobs are people that are sat in a job, and we have to shape all of that around that. You don't ever want to be one of these third parties that just appears and starts moving everyone's jobs around. What we're here to do is take these responsibilities that need to happen and make that fit, the business that's there. So things like the fabric admin, what I'll do is I'll look at that skill assessment. And I have landed in organisations that did not have a dedicated admin. There's maybe 8 people that had access, but no one that owned it. So I've got to look at that skill assessment and say, who has Power BI, who has the strongest Power BI governance capability, and are you a candidate to upskill into that role? Because if you can take someone that already works in the business and can be upskilled to sit in that role, that is so much better than hiring a dedicated Power BI admin that doesn't know your business. I'd say a lot of businesses don't need someone whose entire job is being the admin. There's usually going to be other hats to that job, whether it's you're the business partner or you're the lead developer. And so taking someone in that team and upskilling them through the skill assessment is key. Data modeling would be the kind of second skill that I'd look for them to have, because as the fabric admin, I think it's also your job to be able to QA assets and say, capacity is being throttled and I need to know whose fault that is. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, go for it. Yeah. hmm Yes. Yeah. 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 I think decentralization can absolutely work. I worked for a really long time at a client that had like a federated model. We are here in this blob at the start, and we are going to set up the platform, make sure it's healthy for you. But after that, you enjoy. If you're making money, we're good. And so that's fine. To me, you treat them as power users. So you are the central BI team, and the roles and responsibilities that you have as that small central BI team would be, can I create a model that is universal that people are going to self-serve from with lots of RLS? That means that those data analysts don't need to all be creating 10 versions of the same model. So it's just about this structure still exists, but you then change what you expect to do. So in a decentralized model, the BI developers do a lot less probably report builds. They do a lot more model builds and coaching and training and mentoring. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Thank you. Go for it. Always cross-functional. I mean, I think yeah, in especially if you're a fabric organization, if you're for an organization adopting fabric, I think where it was like, okay, the engineering platform is here and Power BI is here, they're never going to touch. Maybe there was an argument that these two people didn't really have to speak that much. I would still say they do, because engineers typically don't really know Power BI and how fussy it is and how it wants things structured. Power BI people are the people that know the model, know the requirements best. So you need to have that dialogue. And those teams where like they don't really ever speak, it's just where you see the big backlogs. And that's where you see the tech debt. That's where you see the power query creeping in. Where you have this model where people are being treated as pods and they're working together. I sat in a client once that was really efficient. Their backlog was always so thin. When we needed to deliver a report, the engineering requirements would come so quick. And there was maybe about 25 of us, and we had a daily stand up with all 25 people on it every day for about 15 minutes. Some people would maybe say that's far too many people, but you're joining and you're hearing really quickly what the top priorities are for that day. And it's just your quick chance to say, I'm fighting a fire and this is the key thing that I need accelerated. Ran well, those 15-minute, 25-man stand ups can actually be really efficient, and everyone breaks off into their own stand ups. that might be an engineering stand-up and a BI stand-up, but it also might actually be project stand-ups, which are comprised of cross-functional teams. And that, to me, is where it gets really exciting. And that's where we let our friends in the delivery world sort of coordinate those projects and make sure we're all together. That's where your head of BIs and head of engineering are making sure that things are coming together. But actually, the daily, day-to-day comms is between your cross-functional sets of teams, squads, essentially. Yeah, go for it.